Welcome everyone. The Society of Actuaries is pleased to present SOA Candidate Connect, Predictive Analytics for Future Actuaries, presented by the Society of Actuaries. We are very pleased that you're all here with us. My name is Jennifer and I'm your host for the webcast. Please note that this call is being recorded and all participant lines are muted. If you need help at any time, you can email SOA@compartners.com or go ahead and type in the chat box. Today's presentation will last up to 90 minutes and does include time at the end for questions. However, please feel free to queue up your questions for us at any point during the presentation. Simply type it there in the chat box in the lower left corner of your screen and then be sure to click on the send button. If you're listening to audio only and don't have access to the chat box, you can also submit your questions to SOA@compartners.com. I'd also like to draw everyone's attention to the links box on the left side of your screen, where you can view or print the presentation slides, and there are other resources there for you as well. We would like to remind you that the SOA adheres to a strict antitrust policy. For more information on the policy, please visit the SOA website. And one final disclaimer, presentations are intended for educational purposes only and do not replace independent professional judgment. Statements of fact and opinions expressed are those of the participants individually, and unless expressly stated to the contrary, are not the opinion or position of the Society of Actuaries, its co-sponsors, or its committees. The Society of Actuaries does not endorse or approve and assumes no responsibility for the content, accuracy, or completeness of the information presented. Attendees should note that the sessions are audio recorded and may be published in various media, including print, audio, and video formats without further notice. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Matt Sauter, who will introduce the speakers and go over a few more other bits of information. Matt, I'll go ahead and turn it to you. And Matt, you may be on mute.
Oh, thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SOA's Candidate Connect webcast, Predictive Analytics for Future Actuaries. The webcast will provide an overview of predictive analytics, how actuaries are using predictive analytics in their industry, the skills and programs they utilize, and how you can grow your predictive analytics skills. We have several practicing FSA actuaries with us today from Deloitte and Milliman who will expand on these topics and be available for Q&A at the end of the session. Before we begin, I'll briefly introduce myself and my experience in the actuarial world. My name is Matt Sauter, and I'm serving as the moderator for today's session. I'm currently a healthcare consulting actuary at Wakely Consulting Group in Denver, Colorado. I've spent the majority of my career working on commercial risk adjustment through the Wakely National Risk Adjustment Reporting Project, also known as WNRR. And this project takes partial year enrollment and medical claims data from issuers and uses various completion methods, such as regression, to predict full-year risk profiles and risk transfers. I also have considerable experience with other predictive analytics-related projects, commercial pricing, and consumer impact studies. Lastly, I volunteer on the SOA's Candidate Connect Advisory Board, where I help to produce webcasts, articles, and other resources to help actuarial students such as yourselves to learn about and develop skills that will help you succeed in your actuarial career. Working with predictive analytics and seeing its growing role in the actuarial field leaves me really excited for this webcast and to serve as the moderator. The agenda today is fairly simple. We'll first start off with a quick overview of the Candidate Connect group and its initiatives. I'll then hand you over to our panel of experts. And today we have Nate Pohl, who is a manager at Deloitte Consulting, Andy Ferris, who is a director at Deloitte Consulting, and Shi Parks, who is an actuary at Milliman. After the presentations, our presenters will participate in a brief question and answer session. And please note that you can submit questions at any time during the webcast using the chat function in the lower left corner. With that, I'll give a brief overview of the Candidate Connect and its initiatives. Candidate Connect is an SOA initiative that attempts to engage actuarial candidates with the SOA community, providing them with information, inspiration, and network opportunities while in pursuit of the Associate of the Society of Actuaries designation, the ASA. Its main focus is to develop new and relevant candidate content, creating engaging volunteer opportunities, and reach out to our target audience using in-person events, webcasts, and online media, in addition to the biweekly SOA Candidate Connect e-newsletter you have received. On the left side of the webcast window, you can find a link to the candidate resource page, where you'll find lots of useful information, including our newsletter, exam support, and SOA Explorer, which is an interactive map for you to connect with actuaries and employers. Just recently, we launched a new vertical on the SOA website. Check out the Future Actuaries portion and the Get Started page to find the SOA resources available to you. Engage with SOA candidates and members in a new SOA Candidate Connect forum and community. Ask questions about exams, job and internship hunting, as well as share your experiences and views on all actuarial issues and topics. Just simply log in with your SOA username and password. Now to begin the predictive analytics portion of the webcast, I'll pass the lead over to our first presenter, Nate. Nate, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. Hello all. My name is Nate Poley, and I'm happy to be with all you today. As a little background about myself, I'm a life insurance actuary by trade, or by training as I like to say. I've been working at Deloitte Consulting for essentially my entire career. My focus has been on predictive analytics and modeling for a variety of companies, specializing in the life insurance industry, but I've also worked a lot in the sports industry as well, for the National Football League and with several sports teams, including the Chicago White Sox and Jacksonville Jaguars. After finishing up with my FSA a few years ago, I went back to business school to get my MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, which was a somewhat non-traditional approach for actuaries, but I found it to be very useful. And I'm really excited to be with you all today. To get this presentation started, we first wanted to get a better sense for the audience and see where you all are coming from. So we've created the following polling question. The question reads, how many years have you worked in the insurance industry? So as a lot of you have done already, feel free to choose option A, currently a student and or job seeker. Option B, 0 to 1 year. C is 1 to 2 years, and then 2+ years is option D. Great, looks like we have over a couple hundred responses, so that's great. So thanks for filling that out. I'm excited to see so many people on this call that are interested in becoming actuaries and are interested in predictive analytics at such a young stage in your career. Currently, it looks like we have about 45% that are currently students and or job seekers, followed by about 26% of the audience with 2+ years, followed by 0 to 1 years, and so forth. So I think we have a lot of great content for you, and we're really excited that you're interested in this. The second polling question we have is just to get a better sense from you all and what insurance industries you think have the most potential in the future. Keep in mind there are no wrong answers, so please choose one of the options listed. Again, A is for life and annuity, B is health, C is property, casualty, or general insurance, and D is pension retirement. And I'll pause there for a few seconds as results come in. Okay, great. Thanks for all for providing your input. As you probably guessed, the short answer is that predictive analytics has been used in all these areas and has great potential in the future for each of these industries. And that's really exciting for you all as being future actuaries. As we see there, P&C has about 50% or so of the responses, followed by health, 30%, life and annuity, 14%, and then last but not least is pension retirement with about 10% of the responses. So thanks for sharing your response to those poll questions, and that serves kind of as a natural segue for me to outline what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to start by providing a high-level overview of predictive analytics and what makes predictive analytics possible. Then I'm going to discuss how long predictive analytics has been around and where it's going, which is where we touched on in the prior poll. Then I'm going to close by discussing how predictive analytics enhances traditional actuarial processes. Andy Ferris will be the next speaker, and he, as Matt said, will cover predictive modeling as it pertains to the life insurance and annuity industry, which you see in that highlighted box there. He's going to cover the life and annuity opportunity set and cover 3 what I think are really exciting examples of predictive modeling being applied in the life insurance industry today, and in the short term as well. You see in the top right box for health, that's what Shay will be covering. And he will close also, after he completes his section, by covering some very tangible ways for everyone to learn more about predictive modeling. So be sure to stay along for the end and stay tuned for that. And then lastly, as Matt mentioned, we'll close with a Q&A session. So. I want to start my portion by covering one of the key building blocks for predictive modeling and analytics. What I mean by building block is those things that enable this exciting increase in use of predictive modeling in the insurance industry and even broader. I personally consider big data to be one of those key enablers or building blocks. As we'll discuss, the best predictive models are typically the ones with the most data and the ones with the most accurate and complete data. Let's say hypothetically we had a few multiple teams and companies competing in a predictive modeling contest or trying to achieve an objective. The reality is that most of those teams would have access to roughly the same software and tools and methodologies. What I've often seen is the key differentiator is often the team with the most data from the most diverse set of sources typically wins. And that's what sets people apart. You can have a very fancy model and algorithms, and that all is important. But if you don't have enough data or the right data, it's hard to get the right results. As you'll see from the examples on the slide, lots of companies, and that's an understatement, are collecting data on our daily habits, activities, and purchase behavior. The reasons why companies do this are manifold. However, the primary reason that I've seen that companies such as Netflix, Amazon, the ones that you see listed there, why they do this is that it provides these companies with more information on their customers to improve their products and services. So it's really about doing better business. What you'll notice about the last slide, if you see the logos that I had there, was that there's a lot of tech companies. If you look at this timeline on this slide, they would all fall on the right time, the right side of this timeline, or the right tail, as maybe we talk in actuarial terms. So fairly recent, probably in the 1990s, 2000s, even some as recently as last year or even last month, a lot of tech startups. What you'll see is that a contrast is that actuaries and insurance companies have been around for a long time and have what I would characterize as a long and storied tradition. The fact is that insurance companies have been very successful for a long time without what we would call quote-unquote predictive analytics and modeling. And what I see as a new, exciting, and interesting thing for all of us to figure out, candidates, FSAs, ASAs, everyone, is to figure out how our insurance industry and how actuaries can best utilize predictive modeling and analytics. This is particularly important and exciting for everyone listening to this call because, as we saw in the earlier poll sessions, you're early on your career, you have fresh ideas, and you can help shape and influence the insurance industry's adoption of predictive modeling. It's my opinion that there's still considerable work left to be done, and there's considerable ways for you to make impact when it comes to predictive modeling and analytics in insurance. And like I touched on in the last slide, we as actuaries have been doing this for a long time. And so the question really becomes, so where does predictive modeling fit in? That's the question. In the current state, what I've seen is we typically use predictive modeling to augment, not necessarily replace, the way we've always done things. We still have traditional actuarial functions that some of us have started out our careers or are actuarial candidates. Maybe you had an internship. Maybe you've worked in pricing. Maybe you worked in underwriting. Maybe you've worked in financial reporting and done actuarial close processes. Maybe you've worked in risk management. Those, by and large, those functions are not going away. But what we've seen as predictive modeling and analytics is we've seen some really good improvements based upon employing predictive analytics in those functions. So that's the key story, the key takeaway from this slide. For example, if we just take one, let's just take the pricing one. Pricing in itself in product development, that is a traditional actuarial process, and of course involves other stakeholders. But when we're developing new products and pricing them, what we've seen is we can improve our assumptions and we can improve the future profitability of those products by employing big data, non-traditional data sets, and predictive modeling and analytics. And that's really important, all these things you see listed in the bottom boxes, because it really helps us do better business, and at the bottom line enhances the customer experience, and even more importantly, I guess, internally, is that it helps us as companies increase our bottom lines and improves profitability. So there's a lot of change occurring in the insurance industry, and I'd say change and acceleration of change is more of a constant now in all industries. And actuaries are one of what I would call several key players that are working on this exciting new challenge when it comes to predictive modeling and analytics. And I would say lobbying for influence when it comes to being the predictive modeling experts and leaders. I think what the important takeaway is from this slide, and as you'll see in the next two sections that Andy and Shay will speak to, is that actuaries are doing some really cool things and really innovative things when it comes to predictive modeling analytics, and they should be considered the leaders and leading the charge for the reasons you see at the bottom box there. And I want to highlight one of those. For example, let's take the first reason, which I said is insurance product knowledge. Well, what does that mean? Well, to me, it means knowing what the products are and how they work. For example, my background, as I mentioned, is in the life insurance industry, so let's take a whole life policy. As an actuary, and through the exam process, you learn about these products, you learn about life contingencies, you learn about how the products and the policy works. You could make the argument that other stakeholders in an insurance company, such as those listed here, wouldn't necessarily have that deep technical product knowledge, and therefore wouldn't be as well equipped to lead from a predictive modeling standpoint, as knowing product features, data, the drivers of the products, and so forth is very critical to understand the results. So just to summarize, from what I've seen, the most successful predictive modeling projects and initiatives involve a partnership between these various stakeholders. So I'm not saying that we don't need all those listed on the slide. It's actually really key that we bring multiple people to the table and get multiple stakeholders and capabilities involved. But my belief is that actuaries can be, and potentially more importantly, should be leading these efforts in insurance companies. And that is great for all you candidates and as future actuaries. But I just would leave my section is, the future is bright. Predictive analytics and modeling has a great start, as we talked about earlier in the different industries, but there's a lot to be done and a lot that we can improve on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy Ferris to speak more about what I see are some very fascinating things that we're seeing in the life insurance industry. Why don't you take it away, Andy, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great, thanks, Nate. Let's see, guys, as Nate mentioned, my name is Andy Ferris, and just by way of brief introduction, I unexpectedly just had to move from the one conference room to another, so I'm a little out of breath, and just was hoping Nate was going to speak for about another 10 seconds. So let's see. I'm a consulting actuary. I have been focused on predictive analytics quite heavily over the past 6 or 7 years, and my practice area is life insurance. And so, as Nate mentioned, today I will take you through a series of specific use cases and just how we can use predictive analytics in life insurance, and eventually I will catch my breath from running down the hallway. Let's see. I wanted to start first with a polling question that you see here. And as Nate asked you folks, just go ahead and click on any one of these answers here And as Nate said, there's really not a perfect right or wrong answer in these, but wanted to get your perspective from you folks as you think about life insurance and annuity companies. Where are the areas of operations that predictive analytics can be used? We see a lot of folks here clicking on the all of the above, and that is generally correct. And in fact, on our next slide here, I'll take you through just a little bit of my perspective on what I often call the opportunity set. And at the top of this page, you see the typical life insurance product life cycle. It begins with product design and pricing and moves through marketing and distribution and so on. So throughout all of those core business operations, there are opportunities to introduce applications of predictive analytics. Let's see, often to save time, to save money, or to deliver a better customer experience. And for example, we can use, applications of predictive analytics to in target marketing, right? We know enough about a person's lifestyle and health and other factors to assess things like likelihood to buy and likelihood to qualify for life insurance. Those algorithms can make a significant impact in the effectiveness of lead generation tools and related marketing initiatives. Another one is agent recruitment and retention in certain distribution channels. As you folks may know, turnover and retention is a significant challenge for producers. We can design and deploy predictive analytics models that identify those individuals who are most likely to be a successful agent for a given company, considering all that company's unique target market and value proposition and products and other considerations. The business case for these types of applications is extremely attractive. The opportunity set goes on, and in fact, it spans life insurance underwriting and enforced management and retention and many other aspects. You see here that the opportunity set is very large. And in fact, for any given life insurance company, I think this opportunity set, it can be so broad that it can be daunting at times to really kind of decipher all this, to determine how and where to begin. There are a lot of considerations that go into the use case that any given organization may wish to pursue. And that answer is different for every organization. Not only does it depend on the company's business in terms of their target markets, their distribution channels, their core operations, it also depends on, frankly, the willingness and the appetite of that organization to challenge traditional business processes and to redesign and to improve those by deploying applications of predictive analytics. So really, to some degree, that exercise of determining and deciphering this broad opportunity set is one of the most strategic challenges that companies face with predictive analytics. This next slide is a summary of a survey that was recently done, which indicates a pending wave of adoption of predictive analytics by insurance companies. This slide highlights just a sampling of those. You'll see the results are separated for life insurers and P&C insurers, with life in blue and P&C in green. On the right, you see the percentage of companies using predictive analytics today versus 3 to 5 years from now. One that I find really interesting is that life insurance underwriting function. You'll see relatively few using it today, 12%. However, that is projected to be 79% in just 3 to 5 years. So that's a 67% swing, or 2/3 of life insurance companies planning to do life insurance underwriting differently by using applications of predictive analytics to enhance that process. I think it's very, very telling. I think more broadly, this study really tells us that companies are indeed planning to adopt applications of predictive analytics very broadly across their business operations. Yet, as implied by the chart, most of that work appears to lie ahead, right? Some companies certainly have made some progress in deploying applications of predictive analytics to date, but this suggests there is a large portion of that work that would appear to lie in the future. Here we wanted to just summarize briefly some of the traditional data sets that are used, and we touched on some of this, but this is specifically for life insurance. And so on the left, we're showing some of the traditional data sets that life insurance companies have used. We've labeled these as traditional just because their data sets have been around for a long time. Life insurance companies are very familiar with these. These are core and proven valuable data sets, and they remain very valuable today. We're able to supplement that data, however, with some of the new data sources you see listed on the right. So I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I would mention electronic health records as one that has a very large potential to really disrupt and improve the life insurance underwriting function. I think another one is wearables, which you see on the right. Just a quick question for you to think about. We'll touch on it later. Would you be willing to share information from a wearable? Say a Fitbit, say an iWatch, and have that data sent to a life insurance company in exchange for a reduction in premiums if you display healthy behaviors. It's one to think about a little bit. So it's really interesting new data sources that really have the potential to supplement and or replace some of the traditional data sets that are out there from life insurance companies. So with that, I wanted to just focus the rest of my prepared remarks on 3 specific applications of predictive analytics in life insurance. I'm going to start with one on underwriting here, and would not expect folks here on this call to have a lot of deep experience in underwriting for life insurance. So I'll keep this fairly high level, and if you'd like to know more, feel free to ask during the Q&A. But if you have perhaps a parent or another family member who has purchased individual life insurance, then you know what, it takes about 45 days on average to issue that policy, and that's due to the traditional medical underwriting process. At a minimum, if you're healthy, during those 45 days, you had to go visit a medical professional to give a blood exam, to give a urine exam, to take your vitals. Some of you had to subsequently visit a hospital for more invasive testing, and this is all done to enable that life insurance underwriter to assess your personal health status and determine the price that you should pay for individual life insurance. Well, as a new approach, we can use predictive analytics to identify certain healthy individuals for which the policy can be issued immediately without those medical exams. We can find the healthy folks for which there's not going to be anything in that blood exam or that urine exam. What this enables us to do is we can save time, we can save money, we can deliver a much better customer experience. This next slide just shows some of the benefits that are often cited from programs like these. As I just mentioned, obviously, if we can have that life insurance company pay for fewer medical exams, that will save them money. Those are not cheap exams. As I just described, we'll save time by issuing policies faster, by being able to pay commissions faster to our producers. We'll have a much better customer experience if I don't have to go poke that insurance applicant, take blood, take urine, all that stuff. Okay? All of that, when I can pay that commission faster, when I can deliver that better customer experience, guess what? My application volume, my business is I'm going to get more sales because producers want to get paid faster. People want to have a better customer experience. And so really a resulting increase in application volume. I won't go through all of these. You can read some of the rest, but these are some of the very clear and transparent benefits that you see from a new business program. Wanted to also focus just quickly on one for retention. So I just took you through an example of sales and new business, but think about large life insurance companies today and all the policies they already have on the books. Are there things we could be doing with predictive analytics to optimize and enhance that in-force block? And certainly there's a lot of opportunity here. Wanted to show one example here on how we might do that. Imagine taking the entire set of in-force policies and running them through 2 different algorithms. An algorithm you see at the top here, likely to lapse, and an algorithm on the left called customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value is an evolution for a lot of life insurance companies today. You might, for a brief proxy, you might think about that as the profit to the life insurance company, but it's really much broader than that. Companies with well-defined, robust CLV programs would consider things like, well, is the customer likely to represent the company well on social media? It gives me likes, say good things about my company. Are they likely to encourage their brother to buy a policy from that life insurance company? So you can really get a very broad definition of customer lifetime value, but think about that as profit or other type of a measure of the value to the insurance company of having that particular policyholder as a customer. And then think about this other one, likelihood to lapse, right? who's likely to continue to pay those annual premiums, stay with me for a long time, versus who's gonna lapse their policy. And so now think about just putting that in force take the whole in-force block, every single policy, and put it into one of those 4 cells that you see here. And this next slide kind of goes through some of these sample tactics. And maybe I'll just, I think the best way to kind of make this real is to just pick a cell or two. So let's pick high customer lifetime value and unlikely to lapse. Now think about that for a second. That insurance company is getting a very large customer lifetime value, very valuable customers to the insurance company, and that policyholder is unlikely to lapse. Wow. I mean, wouldn't every business want customers like this? It's kind of the ideal situation. So those are the customers, arguably just kind of want to keep them happy, may or may not want to proactively reach out to them. What about the cell right next door? Think about a customer now with a high customer lifetime value that is likely to lapse. Well, we don't want profitable customers to leave and go elsewhere. We want to keep them. So maybe that customer doesn't really understand the benefits of his or her policy, hasn't really learned or hasn't utilized all the benefits there. Maybe we do want to reach out to that customer. Maybe we do want to remind them about the value of that policy and how they can personally be getting more value out of it. So again, I won't go through all of these, but you can imagine the power that this brings, the fact that we can segment the in-force block, that we can deploy customized tactics accordingly, really enables us to operationalize and really improve just what we call in-force management. We don't have to simply kind of lay back and let things happen. We can actually take some proactive actions here. So third, wanted to share one in terms of policyholder wellness programs. These are becoming quite popular among life insurance companies. You wouldn't traditionally think of these programs for a life insurance company, perhaps as you might for some health insurers or some other types of things. But this is one where we're seeing more and more companies deploying these types of programs. It's really, if you kind of think about the objectives of one of these, it's really to create a win-win situation for both the life insurance company and the policyholder. And by that I mean, so the policyholder is going to be encouraged to exhibit healthy behaviors in terms of exercise, in terms of diet, in terms of mental wellness, those types of things. The insurance company is going to offer rewards, say in the form of a discount at a gym membership, or a coupon to Whole Foods or other things. Certainly a benefit to the life insurance company. It's first actually stronger relations with that policyholder that improves things like retention and other financial aspects. So these really make a lot of sense. Like I said, win-win for both the life insurance company and the policyholder. And here I wanted to just show kind of a hypothetical example of how one of these programs might work. So think about a policyholder kind of earning points for things that he or she does that are healthy. So maybe they go to the gym and they work out, or they get a flu shot, or they proactively monitor their blood pressure. You could imagine a lot of different activities that we could reward. And now think about points accumulating and that policyholder achieving various kind of status levels like you might see for airline or for hotel loyalty programs. And now imagine that life insurance company offering some rewards, which could translate to savings on premiums. It doesn't always have to be just that. In fact, it usually starts with some of the things you see here on the lower left. So maybe I can give you a discount on a health checkup, or a discount on some hotel stays, or other types of rewards. So these are just another, I think, very practical application of new data sources, of big data, and really being of benefit both to policyholders and to life insurance companies. So with that, that's what I had in terms of prepared remarks, and I look forward to the Q&A session. And maybe Shay, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you very much, Andy and Matt. Everyone.
Welcome.
All right, so I'm bringing up the tail here. I've got, I guess, a little background about myself. My name's Shay Parks. I'm an actuary at Milliman. I work mostly in the healthcare space, I've been in school about 10 years. Spent all that time working as an actuary. I've been at Milliman the whole time, but I felt like I've had a few different careers. I started off much more on the consulting track, working my way up to being a student, building my way up to managing some client work. Along the way there, I did complete the exam process, got my FSA, my credentials. I eventually found that I still had the appetite to keep learning and doing beyond than just learning what my clients needed, but actually spending some more time with textbooks and courses, and got really interested in sort of applied statistics and predictive modeling. Did enough of that, I sort of became sort of like an intrapreneur, as in sort of helping out various staff here at Milliman doing statistics or predictive modeling, and eventually have shifted over into sort of more of a product space where we try to productionize predictive modeling solutions and things that we can reuse for multiple clients. So during that time, I've had a slightly non-traditional trajectory and have a bit more exposure than just your I know they're reworking the actual exams. Actually, hopefully the people on the phone here, a lot of you are going to experience the new content on the exams for predictive analytics. So, hopefully some of you guys will get exposed to a lot of these concepts earlier in your career. I do believe, as Matt led off, that Matt or Andy pointed out that actuaries have a lot to contribute in predictive analytics. So, with that, I've only got a small single case study here, and then I've got a few slides where I was trying to respond to some of the questions that came in before we got started here. So with that, if anyone else has any questions along the way, don't hesitate to put them out there. So with that, let's go into a brief study. So I work mostly in healthcare space, and they view, or often the perception is that property and casualty does all the cool predictive modeling, and they do a lot of cool stuff. In the healthcare space, I'm going to talk about sort of the canonical or the most common example of predictive modeling. And so a little background on that. A lot of the big healthcare programs, I have experience in the U.S. healthcare system. This applies to almost many of the healthcare systems in the world, and SOA is not the U.S. I'm sure I've got a lot of people on the phone that aren't going to have to deal with the craziness of the U.S. healthcare system. They're going to have to deal with the craziness of their own. Anyway, in the U.S. healthcare system, there's multiple programs that basically take a larger population and sort of chunk it up and give responsibility to others, like smaller plans. Examples of this are Medicare Advantage, or the more recently, the individual healthcare markets or exchanges under the Affordable Care Act. So let's focus on the sort of individual exchanges, the more recent, exciting stuff. What happens there is, if you're an individual in the U.S. and you don't otherwise have health insurance, you can go on these exchanges. You'll see a few different options from different local health plans probably have put up plans that you could elect to get coverage under. You hopefully make an informed decision, you pick something, and then you jump into that plan, or that basically smaller group, all right? Now, what's really important there is the subtitle on the slide is that the groups are not generated at random. There wasn't a random allocation of people to these various groups. They get to pick themselves. And a lot of times they're going to pick just based on geography, who maybe has the most doctors around them or hospitals around them. But, just point is that it's not random what they chose. And so what happens is, this is a overly dramatized pictorial representation of the slide, but we have a bigger group on the right and a smaller group on the left, but the scale is supposed to show that the healthcare costs of individuals have a really, really high variance and a really fat tail, to the point that maybe that one person over there with a disability on the left, they could be responsible for just orders of magnitudes more health costs than anyone else on this whole slide, for example. So that smaller population, the smaller group could be, costing just a ton more than the group on the right. Okay, so that's, most of that's pretty common sense, but where predictive modeling comes into play is it's often the government that's helping out. I mean, especially in the Medicare Advantage space, let's pretend we're back over there and it's the government helping out. The government's the one that said, I'm ultimately responsible for these costs, but I want to delegate these costs to these health plans. Like we'll talk about why. We're going to go forward a slide just for a second. And when I do that, I am going to start talking eventually about more the nitty-gritty of algorithms and predictive modeling, but this next slide is going to maybe more try to present what an actuary, or especially the training to be an actuary, really brings to predictive modeling. Because I could ask I don't think it was ever been called a Gennaro data scientist. We're going to call someone a Gennaro data scientist to build me a model to predict healthcare costs. And these are things they probably wouldn't consider that have big impacts, okay? So I want to allocate some costs to these groups, right? Well, the first thing I could do is I could just say, okay, how much did it actually cost you? What did you pay in healthcare costs or healthcare services for these groups? Okay, the group on the left, okay, here those two people cost you $1 million. Group on the right cost you $10,000. You know what? I'm just going to give the guys that handle the people on the left $1 million, give the people on the right $10,000, and be done. I just pay you for your services. That's actually known as fee for service, and it is common and it happens. And I have this but on there, is that there's some incentives, there's some game theory goes on there. Well, if I'm just paying you for your services, then you're incentivized as a healthcare provider to just provide more and more services, and we're going to keep paying you for everything you do. And I mean, okay, they have their own professional organizations, very much like we have the Society of Actuaries, and they have a duty to not, to just do medically appropriate services, but they also probably have kids and families of their own, and so there's this harsh incentive structure for them to say, well, I could just go ahead and order you to, come back for this other test, and I know I'm going to make another $1,000. So that still happens. There's still fee-for-service that goes on, and we as actuaries don't judge the medical providers. I mean, most of them, the vast majority of them are upstanding citizens, but putting them in this ethically challenging situation of the more you do, the more we pay you, it's not great for everyone involved, okay? So we'd rather shift it around, and actually Medicare Advantage and the exchanges shifted around to where I'm just going to upfront give you X amount of money, and you need to take care of everything that needs to happen for that patient. That's known as capitation. It's usually a capitation payment. Sometimes they don't call it capitation. They'll make other arrangements, but it basically just means I'm going to give you a lump sum, and then you're responsible for taking care of those patients, all right? Now, that lump sum, how big does it need to be? Well, if you have a bigger population, you need more money, but if you have a sicker population, you need more money, and that's where predictive modeling is probably most entrenched in healthcare, is trying to identify who has a sicker population. In fact, in healthcare, it's called morbidity, so which population has a higher morbidity load. And for as long as I've known, you always bring predictive modeling to bear on that. And most commonly it's those risk adjustment models, but those are just predictive models that are trying to predict the morbidity, or not the morbidity or the healthcare costs of a population, okay? Lots of people build these predictive models, Milliman, Wakely, all these other third parties, even the government. And we'll talk about why the government might make some of these models themselves. But all these models exist, and they're all based around predicting healthcare costs of people. So if we go back a slide, you'd want a predictive model that recognizes that disabled population on average costs a whole lot more than someone's not disabled. And so you want to go build these models. That's where you're going to use this predictive modeling in healthcare. So if I ask you to build a model to predict how much, just a random person, let's say Bob, how much is Bob going to cost next year? Because I want to know how much money I need to give you for taking care of Bob. Well, the best predictor of how much Bob is going to cost next year is how much did Bob cost last year. I mean, you would talk about that is the best predictor out there for the most part, is that including a model that was just guess what you spent last year. I mean, for the most part, there's some regression to the means. Maybe it's 80% of what he cost last year plus a little bit of the average cost of the population. You got a great model, okay? But we come back to the same incentive structure that you've probably been managing Bob for multiple years. In fact, earlier I sort of talked about Bob picking a group. Bob did pick a group, but Bob's probably going to stick with it for a while. People are kind of sticky, even irrationally sticky at times. So at that point, I'm not paying you directly for what you did for Bob, but if Bob sticks around a year and you sort of do a lot of extra services for Bob, you're going to drive up Bob's cost. This year you don't make money for him, but then all of a sudden, next year, when I go to calculate, his morbidity, he's going to look really sick again because you did lots of services for him, and you end up back at the same problem where it's just sort of a delayed fee for service, a delayed direct payment. So for that reason, most risk adjusters, in most use cases of risk adjusters, they disallow the use of historic costs. So even though you ask like a generic data scientist, hey, build me a predictive model, like, we're going to include historic costs, it's a great predictor. Right? Well, business-wise, you can't do that. It's a perverse incentive. And so it's a lot of value actuaries can bring to the table there. And then the last one is another real case example of, this is a real case, but it's not all diabetes are created equal. So diabetes is, it's almost an epidemic. I can tell you just out of memory that, being diabetic means you're going to cost at least twice as much as someone that's not diabetic on average, an individual. So it is a heavy morbidity load, and it's a growing epidemic in the U.S. and really across the globe. Any sort of developed countries are often starting to experience issues of people just eating too much candy, sugar, not great food, not exercising. You end up with diabetes, among other ways. It comes to be genetic. Anyway, so if you can't use historic costs, what most risk adjusters use are your age, your gender, your demographics, and your conditions, your medical conditions. Diabetes is a classic medical condition. If someone has diabetes, I can say they're going to cost more. And I want to respect that. If it's a bunch of diabetics sign up for your plan, I want to pay you more money than if you didn't get diabetics, because it wasn't your responsibility. You didn't give them diabetes, okay? I want to respect that they chose your plan. You need to be compensated for that to make it fair across the plans. Well, diabetes isn't just diabetes. There's actually different levels of diabetes. I don't want to get into too much of that. Let's just say simple of like regular diabetes without complications, diabetes with complications, okay? And in reality, there's a big cost difference. Like if someone's well managing their diabetes, maybe it's only 1.5 times more expensive. But if you're not managing your diabetes well, you can be 3-4 times more expensive because you're going to start looking at hospitalizations, which are just outrageously priced, okay? So in reality, if a bunch of diabetics sign up for your plan and they're all like unmanaged diabetes patients with complications, I should really be giving you lots of money to compensate for that, okay? But as an actuary, I know that how am I figuring out if they actually have diabetes with complications or not? Well, the way I'm actually figuring it out is I'm looking at the claims that the providers have filed, and I'm looking at what they coded. Like on that code, like did they just mark this what's known as a diagnosis code that says diabetes with complications? And so I'm actually sort of trusting those providers and those health plans to tell me who's got what conditions. And again, they have their own professional organization, strong ethics. They can, I can trust them, for a large extent. Maybe not, there's a really sharp line between having diabetes and not. There's like medical literature about what that means. As you know, it's like an A1C score and a few other things about, hey, this person does or doesn't. But when you get into do they have diabetes with complications, that gets a lot fuzzier and a lot grayer. And as some of the providers become more and more involved in the health plan themselves and their incentives get sort of commingled, they're going to start to quickly understand that, hey, if it's kind of fuzzy and if I code this person with this other, like diabetes with complications, suddenly I'm going to receive thousands of more dollars. And this health plan will, and some of that will trickle down to me. Well, now you've got incentives on what they coded the diabetes as. All right. So in fact, actually, one of the very important government-provided risk adjusters for the individual exchanges intentionally basically flattened diabetes as what's known as a feature. They said, well, we're actually going to give diabetes and diabetes with complications the same effect, so that we have removed any incentive to do removed any qualms in there about, well, was it with or without complications? So they've actually flattened that out and said that all diabetes is created equal, because we don't want to allow for that sort of incentive structure where it suddenly becomes beneficial to code them up to diabetes with complications, okay? And so in building that predictive model, they had to bring in that consideration of what incentives are they providing to people. Now, funny enough, that provides a different arbitrage opportunity that some people are starting to try to capture on, which is, well, if you're making all diabetics equal, that means that you can find the healthy diabetics, they're overcompensated. To make them equal, we have to pay everyone double if you're diabetics, but the healthy diabetics are only maybe 1.5 times more expensive. So there's actually marketing games you can play of maybe trying to find those, which suburb has healthy diabetics, and let's go market there and get all the diabetics to sign up there, because the government's going to overcompensate us for the healthy diabetics, because they're not differentiating between the healthy and the complicated diabetics. They're not frowning on that. I will say that I don't know any actuaries that have actually played into that, and you definitely want to think that one through, but it is interesting as how additional arbitrage opportunities open up, that there's so much web of complexity that, and a lot of that complexity is what actuaries spend their time studying, both in their exams and in practice, so they can bring a lot of that value. So this slide was supposed to really present what can actuaries bring to the table, all right? Now, from there, I'm going to go now a little bit into some hairier details of people who are asking questions about algorithms and technologies, and it'll close it up with some learning resources. So from there, let's go over and talk a little bit about algorithms. There is no free lunch, which is an actual theorem that says basically no algorithm is always better than any other. One of the original questions before we had this was someone asked, well, do you guys use neural networks or natural language processing or things like that? We do when the need calls for it. What I've got on here is, there's so many different ways to talk about predictive modeling algorithms. Here, I'm doing a one-dimensional discussion, like a one-dimensional plotting of algorithms, and I'm plotting them based on a modeling goal sort of dichotomy. Is your goal inference? Is your goal accuracy? And this is a simplification of the whole way everything works. I only plotted some models up here. But the idea with inference is that I care about my predictive accuracy, but maybe I care more about how I got to my prediction, or at least I care more about understanding my model. And the accuracy may be a bit of a counterpoint to inference, is that if I care a little less about how I got my prediction and more about just making a really accurate prediction for some definition of accurate, I could maybe use different algorithms. And I've just sort of ad hoc thrown some of the common algorithms on here. Far to the left is the algorithms that are easy to understand, or at least sort of understand the inferences they make, would be kind of your linear models, which I'll come back to in a second. Maybe a single decision tree. Somewhere in the middle, for your balance of inference versus accuracy, you've got sort of your ensemble tree methods. Those are like random forests, gradient boosting machines. And then as you really start emphasizing accuracy, that's where you start shifting to the right. That's where you get to your deep neural networks and your crazy ensembles, where you're doing everything to the left and averaging it together. And some of those terminologies, I might have gone a little overboard on the predictive modeling lexicon. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I did want to circle back to that linear models being far on the left of inference. Not all linear models are created equal. In college, you're going to cover like ordinary least squares regression. Some people are going to get to talking about generalized linear models, which is really pretty common in casualty and property insurance modeling. But then there's even discussions of, okay, things like age, how are you accounting for nonlinearities? You do things like bucketing, discretizing, or really advanced stuff like splining or doing generalized additive stuff. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there of what gets used. In practice, more stuff to the left. Why? Well, especially in healthcare where I talk about risk adjusting is actually impacting and basically doing monetary transfers between groups. So people really want some transparency into how was it done, So a lot of the risk adjuster models lean towards the inference side and away from accuracy, because They are, there's so much, everyone's being judged and money's changing hands so much that everyone wants good buy-in and clinical soundness of those models. In more private work, so I work for a consulting company, if it's a more singular customer need, and like they're wanting to keep people out of the emergency room, but just their population, and they really want to know who's going to go to the ER next month, and money's not going to change hands, and they say, I really want to be accurate. Well, that's where we might pull out an algorithm that's a little bit more black boxy, something in the middle, like a random forest or somewhere in there. We're not usually going to go all the way to deep neural nets, like you hear about playing chess or Go these days. That's not as common in the insurance industry, just because people are usually not as comfortable with that really deep, dark black box. But it could happen if someone ever came to you and said, I really want to go crazy and just be as accurate as possible. So, a little bit out there, a lot of healthcare, going to see a lot of linear models, but don't treat them as all equal. You still use the single decision trees sometimes, so they're fairly interpretable, but occasionally you get to use some stuff in the middle there of random forests, gradient boosting machines, but usually not all the way to the right. Usually accuracy is not the only goal in modeling. So with that, there was also a question about, hey, what technologies do you use? What should I be learning to get a job in predictive modeling? I'm going to flash up what I care about, but maybe I'm in the minority. I'm flashing up technologies here. There's a lot of discussion on, actuaries have the capability of being good predictive modelers, but a lot of actuaries are not going to choose to be or to do the predictive modeling. They're not going to choose to train the models themselves. So this technology is more important to the people that are going to choose to train the model themselves, which everyone else on the phone, you can be that person if you choose to be. You just have to balance that with passing the actuarial exams and being an actuary. So it's possible to do it. We've got lots of there are definitely actuaries out there that do the modeling themselves, but you've got to balance that with your other career choices. Like, I threw up a couple languages on here, like R and Python. If you're interviewing for an actual student position, saying that you know R, which means in college that you've played with R some and had to use it for some classes, sure, that's a plus on your resume. Passing 2, 3, or 4 actual exams that they check plus star, awesome. So to the extent that you have to trade off learning R versus passing more actual exams or learning some of these other technologies on here, that's a really hard sell. If your goal, though, is, do predictive modeling or bust, well, maybe you've got to find that happy medium, or I also know that some of the SOA's revamped education is going to emphasize a bit more programming, but they're still not going to get all the way around using something like GitHub, which is meant for source control, which I think I've seen like 1 or 2 actuarial resumes ever mention that they know anything about GitHub, which is appropriate because that's not what they're often applying for. But it's one of the things you're going to have to make a mindful choice as an individual of like how much are you going to emphasize this technology, and also realize that, as a practicing profession, I'm not going to believe anyone that says they're an expert in R or an expert in Python coming out of school, but I will believe you when you say you have an interest, exposure, and some practice with it. Balance your own decision space there. Last but not least, one of the big promises, of this presentation as a whole was to talk about, how, if you really wanted to get into predictive modeling and predictive analytics and really want to do it or at least know more about it, in an hour's time, no matter how great Andy, Matt, and everyone was, you're not going to walk away predictive modeling experts. And really, no matter how many webcasts you listen to, you're not going to walk away predictive modeling experts. So we're going to give some resources that you could choose to spend your own time investing in if that's what you want to spend your time investing in. So what resources are there out there? All right. Well, I have to also balance a little bit with there are a lot of people on this phone, but a lot of people self-selected on this phone call because they cared about wanting to do predictive modeling. So some of this you probably know about, some you may not. I'm still going to try to go over them all. One of the top ones listed here is Kaggle. So Kaggle is a website, a company that sponsors predictive modeling contests. So if you really wanted to be a practitioner of predictive modeling and train models yourself, you would highly impress me if you should send me a link to your Kaggle profile, talk about some of the contests you've entered and what data you worked with and what models you made. I don't need you to win a contest. There's thousands of people competing in all these contests. Getting in the top 10% of a contest result is even just great, or even just trying, okay? I mean, that probably would send the clearest message to me, and it's also the quickest way to learn in some ways. There's a great community out there. There's forums around all the contests, communicating that. I think the SOA is going to announce soon, if they haven't already, maybe some incentives to get actuaries playing around out there, but it's the school of hard knock life. I mean, it's where I learned a lot. When I got started on Kaggle, I was really, really bad, got my butt kicked all the time. I still get my butt kicked all the time, but at least usually can place okay if I choose to invest the time in a given contest, okay? Great resource. Predictive Analytics Podcast. So that's actually a self-promotion. I'm on the Predictive Analytics and Futurism Section Council, one of the SOA sections. So if you do join the SOA eventually, formally, please think about joining our section. If you're on this phone call, you probably care. And as part of that, we recorded a series of podcasts. It's ongoing. We've got about 5 to 10 out there now, trying to present predictive modeling concepts to actuaries. So a lot of the podcasts have been focusing on picking important predictive modeling concepts and explaining them in terms and relating them to actuarial concepts for people that as part of the SOA already. So those have been pretty popular. I encourage you to work through those. If you have any ideas for future ones, feel free to email us, reach out to us. We'd be happy to hear about it and do those. Conferences and symposiums. So I've already seen there was at least one audience question on, hey, how do I learn about conferences and symposiums? Okay, so those are very good, okay? I participated in one or two of those. But I will say, they are very good to get you jump-started, but my statement would be, if possible, try to have something lined up for as you leave those seminars or conferences to keep practicing what you learn. If you're going to get like an R crash course, there's going to be someone right there to help you with the syntax, get you through the problems, but what you really need to get yourself in the habit of is how do I make something work when it's just me, or just me and my coworker when I'm back at the office. So make sure you have a way to sort of make those learnings stick after you've left that symposium and conference. And for how you learn about those, I'm sure someone at the SOA is going to chime in here in a minute with somewhere you can subscribe to notifications about the SOA calendar, etc. If you're big into book learning, I like a lot of book learning out there. There's lots of great books. In fact, honestly, there's probably too much. There was a deluge of books about predictive analytics out there to the point that most of them are good. Some of them are great. Some of them are bad. My favorite one for probably introducing people into things is a fairly recent one known as the Introduction to Statistical Learning. It is available free online as a PDF at the link on this page. It does a great job of talking through building up from like understanding linear modeling from a predictive modeling perspective all the way through important concepts like the bias variance trade-off, and touches on most of those major algorithms I highlighted earlier, and does it in a really nice progression manner. So it's pretty thick. Behind it, there's another book called actually The Elements of Statistical Learning, which is kind of the machine learning Bible in some ways, but it is really thick, dense, and not laid out as a learning path as much as the Introduction to Statistical Learning is. So that's a great resource. If you're really serious about this, I highly recommend snagging that book and reading it a few times. For those conferences and seminars that run one day, those are really great, getting you jump-started, so you need some way to make them a bit stickier. Well, there's those massive open online courses, or MOOCs. Highlighted one here, which is the Johns Hopkins Data Science Specialization. It's one I'm particularly partial to. It's like a 9-course section that takes upwards of a year, 6 to 12 months to finish. And over the course of that, they're going to build up. So I've thrown around R programmer a few times in here, and that you may sort of have been exposed to it some in school, but until you start solving your own problems with it, it's not the same. They're going to spend a lot more time. Like they have a whole month-long course where they're going to have some lectures talking about syntax and projects that you have to write and peer review. You get to grade each other's stuff. Really great things about like sort of building up the toolboxes. And it sort of seems odd that really they only focus on predictive modeling for the last couple months, but that's probably more realistic because they're actually having you do predictive modeling, and to realistically do it, there's a lot of groundwork to build up to, and maybe a lot of that groundwork can be covered as it says in the new SOA curriculum. So, but John Hawkins Data Science Specialization is not the only course set out there. There's a lot of other great ones out on Coursera, Udemy, other places. Feel free to Google, play around, read some reviews of those things. And last but not least, there's a link there saying that the SOA themselves compiles and keeps updated a list of predictive analytics resources issued and made on offer by the Society of Actuaries themselves. So with that, I think I've made it to the end of our prepared content. I'm actually going to turn it back over to Jennifer, I believe, to help coordinate some question and answer time.
Great, thank you very much. It is officially time for Q&A. Remember to ask a question, simply type it in the chat box in the lower left corner of your screen, and be sure to click on the send button. Matt, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to get started.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Nate, Andy, and Shay. I guess just to start off, we got a couple questions coming in about when the slides will be available. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we will post the slides and recording of the webcast in the next issue of our newsletter when that's available. So definitely keep an eye out for that. To open up the question and answer part, we'll ask a quick question about the predictive analytics. So Andy and Shay, in light of the growing role of predictive analytics in our work, and SOA adding the predictive analytics to the exam track, how do you expect this relationship to continue to grow in the future? And specifically, do you think there's going to be an explicit SOA designation for predictive analytics, such as the SARA that was created?
Yes, this is Shay. I haven't heard anything about a specific designation yet. That's one that I would turn to the SOA representatives or ask them to get a specific answer. I don't know. I would doubt it, but I don't actually know. I mean, do you have any more insight, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I can share my own kind of personal opinions on this. So I was on the board of directors of the SOA when we made the decision to bring in this predictive analytics material, and we debated all these topics quite a bit. And I'll just share my own personal views. I think it's exactly right to have it at the ASA level. You know, imagine if you could. One of the things we debated: should predictive analytics be its own track? So you'd have life insurance, you'd have health insurance, and you'd have predictive analytics. I don't think that's the right answer. I think we did the right thing by embedding predictive analytics into the ASA curriculum, so all actuaries now have that. In my opinion, and as you've heard in my remarks, I mean, predictive analytics is a tool that can be used to enhance business processes. And so everyone should be educated on how to use that tool. But we have to bring in each of our practice areas to really, our practice area knowledge, to really create business value out of predictive analytics. So that's a way of saying, I think it's exactly right to have it embedded at the ASA level. It's a part of all actuaries education. And as part of the question, how do we expect it to be used, or how do we expect it to grow? I think it's just what I said. I mean, I think when all actuaries are now educated with this as another tool in their toolbox, we'll be that more effective in our jobs, that much more well-equipped to kind of enhance and improve traditional actuarial processes. So that's some of my opinions on the question. I think it was a great question.
Great, thank you. So a lot of people are asking if we could elaborate, if you two could elaborate a little bit more on what your day-to-day interactions with predictive analytics are, specifically what software and skills you use, and whenever you interact with clients, how exactly that goes. Is it more of an internal consulting with predictive analytics, and you're just talking to the clients about the high-level end results, or how does that paradigm kind of work?
Do you want to go first this time, Andy?
Oh, I don't care. Sure. Well, let's see. So very personally, no. As a consulting actuary, I'm not building predictive analytics for internal use. I'm literally building it for life insurance companies in many of the use cases that I just went through, whether that's in life insurance underwriting, whether that's in in-force management. There's a whole bunch of different applications. So when I talked about that opportunity set, from a very personal daily perspective, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's kind of going into life insurance companies, identifying places where we can improve those business processes by deploying applications of predictive analytics and helping my clients. And to some of the comments that I thought Shay explained very well, there's a range. Sometimes, yeah, you've got your hands deep into that model build using those traditional software packages or some of the newer software packages. Sometimes you've got a client who maybe wants to do that part themselves, but they don't really know how to get it implemented, or they don't know how to really create that business value, or they don't know how to create the business case. So it's really the full range of experiences for me personally. So, Shay, you can explain your experiences if you'd like.
Sure. So I actually am not in entirety minority, probably, but overall minorities. I still write the code on a regular basis. So what I thought about, actually get down to programming, writing models, reviewing them. What I use day to day, use GitHub for everything. So source control for everything, always collaborative, checking our work in. Languages, I threw up there, use R, Python. We do some work in Apache Spark these days, interact with different relational databases. Different types of modeling, like, recently I was helping with sort of a custom risk adjuster where we were doing decision trees based on some behavioral health survey data. So for that one, it was written in R, using decision trees. More recently, I'm also working on some infrastructure work of handling, what sort of compute resources, cloud interactions do we have about making sure that we get the, just make sure that we have the compute resources to actually train these models, and they're available and sort of available to our staff that's doing model training. So I help out with that a lot. With some seniority here, I also deal with sort of release management, just sort of reviewing and discussing the modeling efforts for the local office and other places as well. So I got a little off topic, but hopefully that was more or less driving the answers there.
Oh, thank you. So let's talk about data quality and model integrity for a little bit. I think it's pretty clear that predictive analytics relies heavily on data, but oftentimes in reality we don't have the necessary data, or we don't have complete data, accurate data. So what are kind of some things that you guys do to adapt to this, and some methods you use to still make robust models with the quality of data you have?
Yes, this is Shay. I know this question comes up a lot. I guess I have different personal opinions that you have the data you have. Some people are like, well, can you build a good enough model? And my usual response is, well, how do you define a good enough model? Like, they don't usually have objective definitions for a good enough model. So given that combination, I mean, for any given data at hand, you can learn, and there is usually a maximum amount of information you could squeeze from it with some of those really complex models, deep neural nets or something. Like, you could squeeze a certain amount of accuracy from it, but people don't really understand, like, is that accurate enough? So often I focus more on, are we asking the right business question? Did we get the data we could? Okay, go build a reasonable model, and don't worry as much about, oh, the data is too dirty to build a model. Like, there's no such thing as data is too dirty to build a model. And you talk about I can't build a good model. Well, if you can't define what a good model is, then I'm not too worried about that discussion. So I'm going to focus much more on the right business question and responsibly getting as much information as the data on hand as you can. My personal opinion.
No, agreed, Shay. You explained it very well. I think, in my experience, I mean, like we said on this call, the predictive analytics is typically enhancing an existing business process rather than replacing it entirely. So in general, kind of any incremental lift is better. And I asked the same question to Shay. That's like, how good of a model do you need? And people often don't know that answer. So in general, yes, more data is better. But I often find that we can add value with relatively small data sets, smaller oftentimes than you might think. Finally, I'll just add, a lot of times we're starting with data that comes directly from a life insurance company, but there are lots of third-party data sources out there that we can buy that come complete and clean, and we can use those to enhance as well. So I think a lot of similar experiences, Shay.
So we talked about kind of what is a good model. Could you guys maybe expand on what kind of checks you guys use, and maybe more specifically the accuracy measures you use when communicating to your clients what a good model really is?
I can take that one. You're going to have a bad time when you try to communicate accuracy to a client. I mean, I don't want to believe actuaries. The whole point of being an actuary is to communicate complex things to. Some people. You're saying complex things that you understand more than your average person, and trying to distill down what the client needs to know and understand and help them. Okay, but when you start talking about accuracy, I'm more or less going to say, well, you need repeated cross-fold validation to actually estimate the accuracy, and then let's talk about the loss metric that makes the most sense for this particular business problem. Maybe it is just a squared error, maybe it's AUC, maybe it's something more exotic like a mean absolute precision when you're trying to rank things, and really that conversation just doesn't go well. Any of those, even talking about R squared, it's like, well, it's just an R squared. Like, what's a good R squared? So what usually is more beneficial is, like, if we're talking about that, if we go back to that spectrum I threw up there of like inferential versus accuracy, is if we have the time and the client is really interested in this, is we'll often talk about, okay, if you have a current model, we can talk about the performance of it, hopefully doing something like a holdout set or cross-validation or something responsible instead of talking about the accuracy on its own training data. And that's usually a great conversation to have with the client, explaining that, I know what the R squared says it is, but that's probably just on the data you fit it on. Instead, let's talk about predicting new data. That's where you go into sort of these holdout methods, cross-validation, bootstrapping, things like that. We talk about what we're proposing to do, like maybe what we think is a reasonable model to go with, one we've iterated with on the client. And then sometimes we'll do like a more complex one, like commonly a random forest, because it's real easy to fit one. And you can throw one up there real quick, and it gives real quick estimates of accuracy. And we sort of say, let's give some context to these R squares, if that's what you're stuck on. Like a random forest doesn't show you like a maximal R squared for the data given, but it gets pretty close, pretty easily, pretty quickly most of the time. And maybe that's a 0.2 as R squared. We're saying that like that's a really accurate model, not a good model, but an accurate model. Whereas we have this more interpretable model we worked with you with and got maybe a 0.15, and the old style model only got a 0.1. So it sort of gives you like a spectrum to talk about goodness. Because if you just go in and say, well, every classification we should talk about AUC, and an AUC of 0.9 is always good, I don't think it's not a good basis to ground the discussion of accuracy in. So, but where in the practitioner hat, I care about people that just talk about accuracy on their training data. I say that's invalid, and I'm hoping the new exam content drives that home to all the actuaries out there. Don't do that. But then this other idea of what's good is sort of maybe try some of the more complex stuff to get a scope of what's possible when it comes to accuracy. But again, this is probably personal experience. I don't know if Andy has different stuff to add.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Shay, on like we could report all day on sort of those traditional technical statistical models that are measuring accuracy, but in a business sense, that's just, it's like Shay said, you're not going to get anywhere. If you're trying to explain to the chief financial officer of a life insurance company why he or she spends the money to go develop a predictive analytics program for, a target marketing function, then I've got to come back to that overall business case, because that's really what matters. Hey, you're spending X million dollars in target marketing today. I can reduce that and increase the effectiveness of your target marketing program by bringing an application of predictive analytics. Here's how much you're going to save in terms of hard dollars when this project is done and implemented. Now, that's a measure of effectiveness or accuracy that resonates in a business setting. So, I don't know. I think fairly consistent again. I think with the things that Shay and I are saying here.
Yeah, it's great. So I think another interesting topic is there's more and more data available to us every day, and that should be helping the predictive analytics field advance. With some of this, I wonder what kind of pushback do you guys expect insurance companies to get and the public to kind of give in regards to all these new data sources such as wearables, social media, things like that. And something that pops to mind is how the car insurance industry is using those monitoring devices in cars to see how aggressively you're braking, driving, those kind of things. Do you guys have any thoughts about privacy concerns and the availability of new data?
Yeah, I can share on this one if you like. Or go ahead, Shay.
No, go ahead, Andy.
Okay. Let's see. So yes, absolutely. We have to be very aware of those privacy concerns. Very aware of, are we as consultants risking that one of our clients is going to end up on 60 Minutes in a difficult position trying to explain something? So yes, extremely important. Got to be very aware of it. Very careful. I think one of the concepts you'll see often, whether it's, and I'm not as familiar, to be honest with you, with the auto example and the little device you put on the back of your car. I am familiar with many of the applications for life insurance companies, and I talked a little bit about the life insurance underwriting process. Really, the benefit of predictive analytics there is it's not hurting anyone. I'm taking a 45-day process that exists today in a traditional manner, and I'm finding healthy people for which I can waive some medical exams. I can't do it for everybody, okay? Think about if you apply for a mortgage. Not everybody gets the same interest rate on their mortgage. Not everybody's even eligible for a mortgage. But those who are in the best financial condition and can demonstrate evidence, the process is going to be a lot easier. It's going to be faster. You're going to get a better rate. So there's an analogy there in life insurance. We're using this to help people, not to hurt people, okay? The baseline process that everybody goes through today is 45 days, but I can find a few of you that I can expedite by using predictive analytics. I don't know if that's helpful, or say if you have any other things to add.
Yeah, this is one where I might almost present it a little bit different, as a practicing actuary in a modest-sized company, is that, I may have personal, moral, I don't know what they call them, personal moral opinions, but they don't really matter. We have, what sort of not a bitter, but a different perspective is that's what the lawyers have to care about. I get to use the data I get to use, and combination of does the client have the appetite for it, and is it legal to use? Then let's use it. It's not really a decision space that I get to play in too much. And that one, and not one maybe that I even want to play in too much. But maybe actuaries in general should play in that space, and maybe they will in the future, like some of the people in this phone call.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of stuff, such as wearables, how that pans out. Andy, you went back to one of your examples about that underwriting, and one of the questions we had come in was, what are the risks and what are the trade-offs of using this predictive analytics? And you've kind of touched on it already. But for example, what are the risks and the impact of using predictive analytics and maybe missing a case or two that traditional underwriting would have caught?
Yep, sure. It's a great question. So if you think about kind of traditional life insurance underwriting today, that process I described, 45 days on average, invasive medical exams, blood exams, urine exams, right? That's all done to make sure we can do that assessment of that individual's health and get the right risk class or the right price that person should pay for individual life insurance. the heart of the question is saying, well, if I'm going to use predictive analytics now to start rating those exams for people that I think are healthy, well, what about those that I miss? What about those individuals where the predictive analytics algorithm suggests, yeah, this applicant is healthy, skip the blood exam, skip the urine exam. But if you had done the exam, you would have discovered something. You know, does that happen? Absolutely, yes, it does. I think one of the things in all of this predictive analytics, all you're doing is you're playing the odds. Predictive analytics is never going to tell you with certainty whether that person, you know, is going to have anything in their blood or in their urine. So you're playing the odds. So what you're doing is you're convincing yourself, well, for those that I miss, I'm going to have a higher mortality experience than what I priced for. But what about all those benefits? I had a slide that specifically listed 6 or 8 benefits, many of them very quantitative financial. And now you're in the business of a cost-benefit trade-off. Can I actually save more money than I'm going to cost myself by introducing this program? And the answer is absolutely yes. Could go through a lot of the details and the nitty-gritty and the mortality assumptions and the mortality tables and everything that goes into that. But at the end of the day, it's a cost-benefit trade-off about being wrong on the predictive analytics modeling.
Great, thank you. So I think maybe one of our last questions here, and I'll try to merge 2 questions together. One of them is, what are your thoughts on predictive analytics in kind of the 4 defined actuarial fields as they are? And furthermore, what do you think actuaries' role will be moving forward outside of those 4 defined fields as far as predictive analytics go?
I guess I can take a stab at it. I don't know quite the global perspective. You know, I've been living and breathing predictive analytics for like 5 years now, so it's true from that earlier slide. I mean, I have a certain domain knowledge in healthcare that lets me more quickly understand how to solve business problems with predictive modeling, but also understand the dangers, which is what I highlighted in my slide. I would imagine any practicing actuary in the other realms would also bring that extra bit of knowledge. Have I done any work outside of the traditional insurance space? Yes, I have. Some in pharma, which is close. Done some work for small cell phone carriers in Africa. I've done some, almost got to do some work for a South American airline company. I mean, if you really emphasize the predictive modeling space, then, and you actually pursue the other opportunities outside of insurance, then those opportunities exist and you can land them. I am on an SOA call, so, I have to say being an actuary is great and all, but I will say for those relationships, I did not emphasize the fact that I was an actuary. It didn't really bring any clout to the table. But I think it is a skill set that still persists outside of just insurance. But what do you say, Andy?
Yeah, I think it was Nate that had a slide early on that really kind of sent a message that actuaries really are very well equipped to capitalize on this predictive analytics opportunity. I think, call me biased because I'm an actuary, but we're so well trained and we like the data and the statistics and the math and kind of all the heart of what this is about. But yet we also bring that business perspective, bring a reality and a depth of knowledge in each of our practice areas. And I think that combination that the actuary has, that depth of business knowledge, that ability with the data and the statistics is really, really powerful. So I think you can apply that to just about any practice area or any business or any industry, if that's where the actuary chose to practice. Right? Again, I think we're really well positioned and really look forward to the future of predictive modeling for actuaries.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks a lot, Shay. That's a lot of really good information there. I really appreciate it. Just one thing I wanted to emphasize is just I really encourage everyone on the call to just go out and get after those resources Shay posted. Pick up our Python, any of those programming languages, and just get something going, work on some projects. I think that'd be really good for everyone. And I think with that
was against passing exam.
That's true. I think with that, we'll conclude today's webcast. So if you take a look at the links box on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that the webcast evaluation is there. So please take a moment to complete the evaluation and give us your feedback on this program. We do look at these every time after the webcast and help influence our future webcasts. Your comments and suggestions are very important, and they definitely help provide you with the kind of quality programming we have here. To register for any of our upcoming webcasts or meetings, or to purchase recordings of previous webcasts, please visit SOA.org. And I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in today's webcast. We hope to see you guys here again soon. Today's program is copyright 2016 by the Society of Actuaries with all rights reserved. And this concludes today's program. Thank you.